Yeah, so drop back a couple of years, and we had written this book challenging people to think about friendship and community and dementia in new ways, and finally I had to say, so what are we going to do about it? How do we put some of this into practice? And as always, you start by digging around the web. What's out there? And we stumbled across, where can we find a community like this? What would a community look like? Is there something that, like our dream out there? And so the first thing we ran across through a friend was a closed group on Facebook. Facebook, of all places, for persons, global community of persons with dementia and care partners in conversation, so that if a care partner is having a crisis in the middle of the night, there's always someone in Facebook to talk to and give them ideas, and persons with dementia expressing themselves. It spawned numerous subpages. I'm chaplain to the Memory People prayer page and such, but we were particularly interested in what some of the folks in the UK were saying about some of the programs and services they were enjoying, particularly something called memory cafes. We had never heard of a memory cafe. How many of you know that term? So we began digging around and found that here, just for Cornwall, way down the south of England, in the Isles of Scilly, whatever, there's an amazing list of memory cafes, and you can look up when they're meeting and what's going on. And we found that in Great Britain, the Rotarians, the Rotary Club, has made dementia their #1 mission priority and formed REPOD, Rotarians Easing Problems of Dementia. So clearly there was a lot going on in other parts of the world. The best practices were to be found outside the United States. What a shock. And that's when we invented dementia tourism. Dementia tourism, it means that when other tourists are going to museums and cathedrals, we're going to church basements and community halls and sleeping in the spare bedrooms of people who issued invitations over the internet. So we toured much of England without seeing a single tourist site, never going in a shop, and never but once glimpsing the sea. Flew into Manchester, and we began in Leeds, where Susan had an old friend, a gerontologist and Methodist minister, and went to, because here's from a cafe, it's Memory Cafe usually, sometimes other names. In Leeds, it was called Dementia Cafe, a place to come and chat with others in similar situations to yourself and take part in interesting and fun activities. Memory cafes are almost always the person with the diagnosis or the person with the condition and a care partner or friend. It's not splitting off, it's not therapy, it's not brain exercise. It's a social time to share together with other folks dealing with the same life situation. It's about food and fellowship and fun. There are volunteers, always a professional volunteer in case someone has a question or a problem, but we call it softening the categories. At a memory cafe, it doesn't matter who has dementia and who does not. If you want the slides, I bet you grab them from Nancy before you leave. But it's just about to get good. And so you're having a great time together. Care partners are meeting other care partners, forming friendships, and it has an effect that can last for days, as I'll say more about. You get help to learn more about dementia, but most importantly, you just relax and enjoy yourself. No stigma, no anxiety. The care partner doesn't have to apologize or explain, because everyone there is dealing with the same dynamics. So again, from cafes, I enjoy the singing and seeing all the lovely warm faces. There's a bit of everything for everyone. It cheers me up. A place where we can laugh or cry, share, relax, not worry about stares. They help us so much and give us peace of mind. So here's where I really want to tell you a story. We are now in rural Gloucestershire, in a very, very small village. And we were spending a few days with a colleague Susan had met once, I believe. His name is Rob Merchant. He's an Anglican priest and a very, very fine gerontologist. And he, at that time, was caring for 7 rural parishes scattered about these villages in Gloucestershire, many of them averaging 9 to 12 at worship. And what his newest building was the one built in the 14th century or something like that. What you learn when you're going to the little rural churches in Gloucestershire is always use the loo before you go to church, because they won't have one there. There's no plumbing to be had. But he took us to visit this couple. We call Arnold and Edna, obviously not their real names. But Arnold, second marriage for them both. He was at that point moving toward mid-stage with his dementia. Fairly well-known artist in England. That's his work hanging on the walls. His Rob, the rector, described it as chocolate box art, the kind of art that gets made into jigsaw puzzles and biscuit tins and such. I keep forgetting the American artist Kincaid. He's like the Kincaid of England. Disturbingly, had reached a point in his dementia where some of his own paintings were disturbing to him, and when his wife wasn't watching, would scrape off the parts that bothered him, which raised quite an ethical issue for her in terms of it's his art, but she did hide a few of his better pieces. But just to tell you a little bit about their life. Obviously, she's a bit younger and is his primary care partner. England has this thing called the National Health. Like virtually every civilized country except our own, has some version of national health coverage. So the National Health includes a program of community psychiatric nurses. And so the community psychiatric nurse comes to visit them once a month to see how they're getting on and if they need any other additional government services. So at this time, Edna was getting 3 hours of paid professional respite care each week, so she could tend to personal needs and errands. As his condition progressed, she would be entitled to more compensated professional respite care, and they were about to add professional care to come in and help bathe him because he was beginning to resist her bathing him. So, that's the government part of it. Also, once each year, he is assessed by his psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist comes to the home to do that. A couple of days later, I met a psychiatrist and said, do you really visit your dementia patients in their own homes? And she looked at me like I was the stupidest person she'd ever met and said, well, if I made them come to the medical center, they'd arrive anxious and confused, so how would I assess them? Anybody got a good pithy answer for me? I didn't have one.
Thank you very much.
And the National Health has this strange idea that by providing these services directly in the homes, people will stay in their homes years longer, and it will cost the country less in the long run. And we're still struggling over, Obamacare, and a long way removed from this. But in addition to these government health services, each month they go to at least one memory cafe. Each month they go to a program called Singing for the Brain, also designed for people with dementia and care partners. Each month in this rural area, there is a tea dance for people with dementia and their care partners. Each month there is a restaurant outing specifically designed for people with dementia and their care partners, and a few other things. So their social calendar has each week 1 or 2 events specifically designed for their circumstance in life. And meanwhile, they're fully participating in the life of an English village, going to the post office, doing these things, interwoven with community. So, we moved on down to Cornwall, this hotbed of memory cafes and other services. This was one in a Methodist church basement in Falmouth. Now, quick tell me who has dementia and who doesn't, because half the people you're looking at have dementia. Obvious, isn't it? They're just people having a lovely time together. And each cafe takes on its own identity and flavor. So in this one, they're very into democratic voting, like voting on what song they will sing when they get together, what song they'll sing when they depart. They democratically voted on the snacks they have. In this case, cress and egg sandwiches, and biscuits and cakes and tea. And it's very important that all be served on lovely plates and lovely cups because it's a special time. Okay, and they may sing, they may do art projects. There's kind of a spark plug lady who heads it up. If there's ever a lull going on, she's quickly digging into her books for jokes or anecdotes or whatever. But volunteers, we arrived and immediately got put to work. So there's a gentleman there, he's new, he seems to have advanced dementia. John, why don't you go sit with him? And so I did. And just okay, this woman here in the kind of blue top, fairly significant dementia, and her regular driver was not available that day. So she somehow managed to take 2 buses to get there on her own because it was so important to be there. Someone gave her a ride home. You can't see in this picture, but back here is the psychiatrist I mentioned earlier. She had come on her day off with her little boy just for something fun to do with her boy. So the network is such that no matter where you live in Cornwall, within a reasonable travel distance, there will probably be at least a memory cafe each week. And in addition, for some people it's a point of entry, somebody who's not been diagnosed, but he's begun to wander or forget things. His wife doesn't know what to do. She talks to a friend because she knows her friend's husband has been diagnosed with dementia. Well, why don't you come with us to the memory cafe and see how that is? And then maybe she talks to a social worker who's there, and that's what leads to the diagnosis. Okay, so memory cafes are just part of the fabric of community. Another one we went to, the mayor of the community was there. He's a committed volunteer and committed to making the whole community dementia-friendly in multiple ways, as you'll soon see. So now we're at our second, third, I don't even remember, memory cafe. This we did not get to attend, a Singing for the Brain session. Very similar, except everything is built around singing. And it begins with everybody being greeted by name in song. So if I'm the facilitator and I come up to Bev, and it might be like leading the whole group and saying, and I'm forgetting all the new words. Hello Bev, how do you do? We'd like to say hello to you. And each person, as one woman said, you know, it's probably the only time in the week that he's called by his name, and how lovely that they sing it to him. And the songs are a mix of old familiar songs built around a theme. Clearly there's a song about the rain going on here because some umbrellas popped up. But one of the amazing things is that folks who are largely aphasic, have mostly lost the power of speech, can still sing, and after singing, sometimes regain access to language for a bit. So a woman talked about the only time her husband initiates conversation is driving home from Singing for the Brain. It's a copyrighted name, but our local VNA, Valley Nurse Association, has started a parallel program they call Lyrics and Laughter. It's been so successful that they started a second group, and now they're starting to bring it into the memory cafes we're doing, which we'll tell you about.
What was the name again? What and Laughter?
Lyrics and Laughter.
Lyrics and Laughter. They just made it up because they couldn't call it Singing for the Brain.
But you can Google Singing for the Brain and
Oh, watch some wonderful videos.
Watch some videos.
Yeah, go to YouTube and punch in Singing for the Brain and you'll see lovely things. Outings of all kinds. This organization, Dementia Adventure in Essex, just won some major awards because they don't just do, they do like little garden and farm visits for folks with dementia and care partners, but they do far more ambitious things, including multi-day sailing trips for people with dementia. The focus on what still can be done rather than on limitation. In Scandinavia, I forget which Scandinavian country, there's a university or school for people with dementia to listen to lectures by college professors. And often they don't remember the content of the lecture. But these folks who have had high levels of education, for them it's being in a joy zone to be in a lecture hall, listening to a wonderful lecture. So all kinds of things like this happening throughout Europe. But we experienced it, returned from England, filled with energy and excitement, and asked the obvious question, why are these programs, all of them inexpensive and easy to organize, not happening here? Again, I think it's something in cultural history here. But the Memory Cafe movement started in Holland, really took off in England. Versions of it are all through Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe. So we've experienced these kinds of programs in many, many locales in Europe. So it took us about 2 years to create the Fox Valley Memory Project, trying to create in our little corner of Wisconsin the US's first kind of prototype of a dementia-friendly community, in the hopes that if we did it very, very well, that we draw some attention and interest in the rest of the state and the rest of the country. It helped that Susan and I had a 30-year history in the community and some pretty good connections. So Susan and 2 colleagues, a doc, a geriatrician, and then the woman who headed up aging services and housing services for Lutheran Social Services for all Wisconsin and part of Michigan, formed a little task force for our community foundation, got a small grant, used a small grant to hold a community breakfast to educate, a community think tank, began to touch bases with potential collaborators in the project, and then just enough money to hire a grant writer to write a bigger grant to really get things moving. So we took time to really develop this and get ownership in the whole community. We did a lot of talking to any group that would listen to us. And again, I've been a pastor for 23 years there, Susan a professor. We got to really tell the story a lot. So we came up with the Memory Project, which has multiple components. We started with memory cafes, because that seemed to be the low-hanging fruit, easy to do, very, very visible, and to have immediate impact for people with dementia and their care partners. We learned by then, had done a lot of searching and networking to find memory cafes around the US. We started looking, we could find 2, one in New Mexico, and I forget what the second was, and one popped up in Minnesota, another one. By now, there were up to 7 or 8 in the country. We started with 2 locations, each holding 2 memory cafes a month. We have since added a 3rd location, and our 4th starts.
There's a map.
Okay, I'll show the map, right. We'll get to that. We now have more memory cafes meeting in our small area of Northeast Wisconsin than in any other state in the country. We have more recently opened what we call a Care Partners Welcome Center. It's a slow rollout, but the idea is to have a place specifically designed to serve the needs of active care partners. Because what we discovered was, in terms of what they need, information, resources, connections, guidance, that there were pockets of it here and there and there. Here's the Alzheimer's Association, good people, lots of good information, but stretched really, really thin. Our county, our state system has something called the Adult Aging and Disability Resource Center, good people handling far too many needs of different kinds. We wanted to bring it all together in one place and have some long-term dreams that would include, we were talking about the Alzheimer's Association doing their family support groups there, while we provide respite care for the person with dementia, so the family care partner doesn't have to scramble for somebody to cover things. We're setting up computer stations for webinars. We're trying to do all these things, but we're also prepared for the people who just walk in and say, my husband just seems really confused, he doesn't want to talk about it, and when we go to the doctor, he fakes it, and what do I do? Just a starting point kind of place. So as far as we know, there's nothing like this in the United States. We will see how it develops. Here's a biggie, Memory Assessment Center. I don't know how things are in Southern California, but right now in our region, with this critical shortage of geriatric psychiatrists, who's left to do the assessments? Neurologists, some highly qualified geriatricians, etc. Neuropsychologists, right. But suppose that your family doc, your primary care physician, actually senses something is wrong. When you go in and say, I'm worried about my memory doc, doesn't blow it off, as they too often do, but runs, as they're required to do under Medicare, a little mini screen, a mini cog or something like that, and says, yeah, I think you have reason for concern, I think you should have an assessment. Waiting time locally where we live is up to 8 months to get in. And that's just unconscionable. That's just immoral. And when you get it, it will be done straight clinical medical model. The model we will be instituting, and our dream, long-term dream, is to have a dedicated building that will feel like a home and not like a medical clinic. We'll start out of a family practice residency center run by the University of Wisconsin. But the process, we'd like to get the wait time down to 3 weeks instead of 8 months. And it would begin with a case manager coming to your home to build a relationship, chat with you, get to know your environment, so that when you do come in for the assessment, the first face you see will be someone you've already spent time with. Just bring some humanity into this and take away the fear. Because we're talking about an assessment offered in a spirit of hope and possibility. We're doing it as quickly as possible, diagnosing early, diagnosing accurately, but diagnosing in a way that talks about hope and possibility rather than doom and gloom. Research and sustainability, that's Susan. She is our research department. She talked about already doing a community survey about knowledge and attitudes. Now working on a designed a survey instrument her students will use to learn what impact our memory cafes are having on those who participate. We want to generate metrics, not only because that helps keeping the grants coming, but it will help sell this idea to other communities. What we kept hearing in England is, I go to Memory Cafe with a stranger and I leave with my husband. It's not just improving the quality of life, but we believe the more social interaction and joy, the more we can delay the progression of the disease. It's the only preventative we have right now, only meaningful one. Not a whole lot of clinical proof of this, but a lot of anecdotal evidence that says it makes a difference. Purpose and livelihood. Mentioned this briefly, but this one of our collaborators, Goodwill Industries, where I've had a strong connection, has had endless experience at dealing with barriers to employment for people with other kinds of disabilities. How do they take what they know how to do and apply it to dementia? Because, if we're talking about the relatively rare young onset Alzheimer's, which tends to come on in your 40s, we're talking about people getting diagnosed at the prime of their lives, often with young children, and losing their means of livelihood. In this country, if you're 28 years from Medicare and lose your ability to make a living, you've got huge problems. And the workplace is also a center of meaning and purpose and socialization. So we're challenging, with Goodwill, first educate employers, many of whom don't even understand that dementia is now classified as a disability, and you have eligibility for SSID, right? Goodwill includes a financial counseling agency to help people work in those pieces of it, but they have job coaches and job retrainers to say, negotiate with the employer. Okay, this gentleman can no longer do the high-level ledger work, but he's a wonderful employee who values the company. Let's assess what he can do, and maybe at a lower compensation level. And if it can't be for compensation, to find meaningful volunteerism. So it's purpose and livelihood. And this is yet to be launched. Again, it's going to be a work in progress. We'll see what happens. Community education, ongoing. We just held a major community education event a week and a half ago with two well-known geriatric psychiatrists, had more than 400 people attend. The next day we did a CME day for physicians, mostly primary care docs, and had about 80 come because they're hungry for understanding. What do I do? I'm getting triangulated by families. The daughter who lives with her says she's good, but the daughter who doesn't says she's exaggerating, and she says, I'm perfectly fine, and I don't know how to do any of this. I don't know the assessment tools, and moreover, they don't give me enough time to do this sort of stuff. So we're trying to resource and educate our docs, because our idea of the assessment center is we're not going to let the primary care physician just hand over the patient to psychiatrists because they don't have any, or a specialist. Rather, we will work with the primary care physician and supplement his or her work so there's consistency of care by a trusted physician. Just, again, a model that begins with psychosocial rather than medical. And fortunately, potential funders are very intrigued and are being enormously supportive at this stage. Sustainability will, of course, become the issue. Most of what we're doing is not that expensive. Hopefully the assessment center will carry some of its own weight in terms of reimbursements. We only have one employee right now coordinating the program. We'll see. Foundations love to give you money to start something new. They don't like to give you money to keep something good going. That's just the reality. And finally, long-term care outreach. This is like wanting to get rid of the moats. We want to be a resource to our long-term care facilities and help them do things that they're not in a position to do themselves. When we look at the long-term care needs, as the pig keeps moving through the python, to start with the over beds. Who's going to be building beds and quality programs for the new culture of care? Is it going to be governmental entities? They're broke. Is it going to be not-for-profits, religious and such? More than that, the religious institutions are either bailing out of nursing care or they're chasing what they have to in this market, which is Medicare rehab dollars and such. They can't afford to do Medicaid care where you lose money in every patient and bleed that money. And so the for-profits are going to be critical, and they have to find a way to make it work. And we have to integrate them into community. So Susan mentioned the Alzheimer's Poetry Project. We, working with Foundation Milwaukee, have enabled this poet and director to come in and train the staff on 5 or 6 facilities on how to use this wonderful engagement through poetry method with their residents. And we hope to keep doing that, providing resources to our long-term care facilities and connecting them to the community. Because at the end of the poetry project thing, we're just going to have a big community event. And we're going to read poems written by our friends with dementia. And many of them will be there. And we will do some of these exercises and help the whole community see these are your friends and neighbors. And get folks into the care facilities as friends. In my facility, working with Susan and one of her students, we did a little trial project in which volunteers from a local church came in to do an experiment on friendship, just spending time each week with a group of women with fairly good social skills but advanced dementia to see what it would mean to both groups to be spending a few hours a week together. And we want to do more and more of that sort of stuff in our long-term care facilities. So memory cafes came first, very collaborative. You have heard many of these names before. Community Center, the University of Wisconsin, that's Susan and her students. Some of this is in-kind goodwill. But bringing together organizations, not trying to control this, but to work together. So this is our area where we live. The city of Appleton, where we are, is down through here. You can see there's a string of communities up and down this river. So we started with these 2 locations in Appleton. One's in the community center. It's actually an adult day center, but they don't use it weekends. So we built a cafe there on Saturday morning, because Saturday morning, that's adult children come with a parent. They had a private coffee shop, a very lovely one, was eager to have us come. We have one at a public library in a city called Neenah, and they're so excited about it, the library staff. Susan and I had done some in-service things to libraries in the area, just about aging population. And said, can we have one in our building? And they're so excited, they're carrying it all themselves, and now they want us to speak to the State Association of Libraries, because they say, wouldn't libraries be a natural way to spread this throughout the state? Yeah, I think it would. So again, very little money, just a little bit of training for volunteers and a commitment, you make it happen. Menasha, a community center here, and then up here at a senior living facility, they'll be doing 2 cafes a month up here. So this whole area has maybe 300,000 people, the service range footprint, and we will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 memory cafes a month. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. So, anybody that's surprised who recognizes Eric Kandel and what he might have to do with memory, Susan can tell you later. We put out our sign, Memory Cafe Meets. Here's some folks at the coffee shop. Again, who's volunteers, who has dementia, who doesn't. Well, you probably know this woman does not have dementia. That's at our community center. Dancing. Oh, we do a lot of dancing. You know, I could tell so many stories, but this one day where we had someone playing songs so folks could dance, we had a dance floor set up. We had a couple there for the first time, very elegant couple. You know, a couple you would notice, just striking, both of them. And he had pretty advanced dementia. And he didn't seem to be real aware of what was happening around him. And folks are dancing, and his wife kept trying to nudge him. He wanted nothing to do with it. Towards the very end, he consented to dance with her. And it turns out that one of their passions through a long marriage was ballroom dancing. And those moves were still there. And here she is, just tears streaming down her face. She had not danced with her husband in 5, 6 years. And it was just like this perfect moment. And Memory Cafe makes these moments possible. So that just Welcome Center we've mentioned. Let me mention this final thing here. We're back to Camelford down in Cornwall again, an amazing community. This is where the mayor is extremely invested. And the Prime Minister of England has called for communities to join in create Dementia Action Alliance. So you see this symbol? Okay. Small place, Camelford, 12,000 folks or so, of whom 23% are over the age of 65. You can start to do the math about how much dementia there would be there, all right? But see, we are dementia aware, raising awareness. Any shop or business in Camelford that has committed to learning enough about dementia to extend hospitality is invited to put this symbol in their window, basically saying this is a dementia-friendly establishment. As we say time and time again, some disabilities are accommodated with curb cuts and automatic doors and wheelchair ramps. And by the way, we found out that they benefit us all, don't they? They do curb cuts for people with walkers or wheelchairs, and mothers with strollers found out, oh, thank you very, very much. Dementia is a disability accommodated with patience and kindness. And our dream is to educate every waiter and waitress, because menus are absolutely bewildering. We're back to the little Italian village. The chicken's very nice today, ma'am. Would you care for that? So as we go back to Camelford, here's the church, St. Thomas. Look in the window of the church. It's a dementia-friendly church. They've made a public profession and commitment. Here's a fish and chips place, right here. We are a dementia-friendly establishment. The takeaway, the hot and cold food, we go shop by shop through Camelford. There it is. A community that is saying to the world, this is defining of who we are as a community. We are dementia-friendly and dementia-inclusive. So, access to early and accurate diagnosis, education to reduce fear and stigma, hospitality. It's a simple concept, right? Extended to persons and their care partners, better support for care partners. Mercy knows they need it. And understanding dementia as a disability that can be accommodated with patience and kindness.